𝗫𝗫 podcast. Today we are cutting straight into what matters and not what AI can do, but what it takes to make it work inside a real enterprise. Today with me, I have two guests, Himanshu Shah, co-founder and CTO of 𝗫𝗫, and 𝗦𝗃 𝗀𝗵, who has been leading AI transformation for over 2 decades at Accenture and Deloitte, and has been building and governing AI systems in public sector, healthcare, finance, and large-scale enterprises. I welcome you both to 𝗫𝗫 podcast. Let's get started into it. So, Mr. 𝗦𝗃, you have spent more than 25 years in enterprise transformation at Accenture, Deloitte, and now governing AI system in production. What made you finally say, this is real, not just a hype?
So thank you for having me. I believe for me, AI became real when it stopped being just a PowerPoint promise. It went beyond and it started rewriting or rewiring operating models. So it was my first client when I was with public sector, and I could see that AI was just not assisting, it started performing the whole work. So the use case that I used was more in the procurement area, where I had automated the entire process of purchase requisition to the purchase order, to the procure to pay track, and I could see a significant difference. Similar thing we used in managing infrastructure, the triaging process, the compliance reviews, and so on. But it became real when I could see the business SLAs being crashing down. The turnaround time, getting it down to 70 to 90%, which was really significant. And I felt it was the repeatability aspect of it which matters the most. AI getting embedded in the form of workflow with the guardrail, the security, and the measurable business value. So technically, if I were to summarize my experience, it started changing the business SLAs, generating outcomes. That's what matters. And more important, the value that emerged got to do with AI being embedded inside the processes and just not being parallel to them. And certainly, the moment of truth is when leaders ask, will it work? Or now they have started asking what to do, how do we redesign, and tell us how does it work with the real life operating model.
That's very insightful. And earlier, you have mentioned in your white papers that AI doesn't fail because of models. It fails because of operating models and governance. That's a very provocative line. What does that look like when it goes wrong in real enterprises?
See, I believe the model exists. It's accurate. The POCs look great. Where does it collapse? It collapses during the integration phase. It's all about lack of ownership, accountability, and the compliance. And that's what I would like to emphasize upon. In terms of the need is more in terms of ownership and accountability, along with the compliance. And I had seen the failures, right? It typically used to happen when there was no clarity in terms of who owned the outcomes, what decisions were generated, and who was owning it up. I talk more about human in the loop because that is going to play an important role, and that is one of the reasons where failures have happened. The other thing was output being produced, right? There is no lineage in terms of how this outcome get delivered. The other aspect is clearly in terms of change management. How do we get people on board, the people who are going to use the system, how well they are trained, and the relevance of using an AI system is made relevant to them, as well the guardrails. We talk about privacy, security, regulatory exposure. So how these things stand to be mitigated, because these are the risks which typically organizations think about. And I would rather say this is very much part of it, which we need to embed it when we design an AI system. And you should actually shadow deployment by business teams without real oversight. So that is when they start seeing it happening in real world. And if I were to put it, it is about human governance a dual track operating model where AI and human work together. And it should not be just an expensive toy that organizations are leveraging, but start looking at it as enterprise systems that are going to govern the business processes.
That's really very well said about the industry that we work in and about the insights about deployment and everything. Which brings me to my another question. You have deployed AI across healthcare sector, airport, banking, public sector, environments where the consequences could go wrong for real. How do you draw the difference between what is AI must do and what humans should loop in?
See, I believe AI can automate judgment, but only humans hold accountable. Once again, it becomes very important that the human in loop is, really leveraged well. And I typically use a 3-zone framework. One is what to do with zone 1, if I were to say automate, which is low risk and high volume. So here you could do with lesser human intervention. But the second zone, which I recommend, typically what I call the medium risk, AI proposes, humans decide. Because all those examples, when we talk about, say, in financial services sector, you talk about credit decisions, you talk about medical insights in healthcare. So it's the AI proposes or does a recommendation engine to propose, but it is the human who take the decision that matters the most. And zone 3, which I would call it as human only, because this is an area which is high risk. It could affect the life of a patient or a credit decision being given by a bank. And these are got to do with ethical decisions. They may be subject to penalties. There could be life-impacting outcomes which are based upon these decisions. And this is where I believe responsible AI comes into picture. We also call it as ethical AI. And our objective when we build system is to design system that AI accelerates, but it is the humans who authorize it. So I believe if you go with this principle, then you would find that most of these questions get well addressed.
That's really very well said. And the distinction between the AI and how the human should intervene and your perspective about how it's very critical, that brings me to question that Himanshu, at 𝗫/3, we have built GenAI in a box around exactly what Mr. Sadagopin has been explaining: the governance gaps, the integration depth, cost unpredictability. What does production-ready agentic AI look like inside your framework at 𝗫/3?
See, essentially, when we started the GenAI in a box journey, right, it was meant to be used by organizations who are circumspect about whether to embark on the GenAI journey or not. Secondly, the unknowns, right? The cost aspect, the ROI, the budget, the skills required, right? That will be part of that implementation. But now, since last 3 years, what we've observed is, as he mentioned, right, responsible AI, ethical AI, compliance, right, have become the de facto thing to be considered, right? So just as security is important, now it has become more of a compliance thing that is important, right? How do you ensure you have the right guardrails? How do you ensure the end-to-end implementation ROI is achieved, right? And within the budget that you are looking at. And secondly, without affecting the existing ecosystem that you have, right? Without affecting the existing guidelines that you have outlined. And in a way, ensuring that those agents are flexible enough to incorporate changes that may come from the state body or from the compliance body over a given point of time, right? That's why an agentic AI flavor to it, where you just delegate the task to the right agents and they take care of it irrespective of the cycles of attendance that come through. Having the right amount of security, the right amount of compliance factored in as part of that implementation, and ensuring that you know the right set of tools that are required to be used in the background. So GenAI in a box has brought in an industry flavor to it. GenAI in a box has brought compliance, security layer to it, and GenAI in a box has made it possible to look at it from a scalable solution point of view, not just a POC point of view.
That's very well said. That brings me to a very critical question, Mr. Sadagopin. There's a graveyard of AI pilots that never made it to production. You must have seen it on both sides. What separates the organization that scales from the ones that are stuck?
See, I believe I use this term called as autonomy with oversight. We all get excited when we say autonomous systems. But the fact is, AI does the work, but it is the organization which retains the control. We typically use two terms, flexibility and control. Flexibility in designing an agentic AI system to handle the functionality is appreciated and understood. But the moment you talk about control, that is where the organization needs to retain the control. It has got to do the entire action, the fetching the data, the triggering the workflow, validating the contracts, processing renewals, updating systems. All these things you need to have boundary conditions. Right. And when you say boundary conditions, you talk about guardrails, what they can, what they cannot do, escalation paths when the confidence is low, and also got to do with leaving an auditability or audit trails in terms of who did it, every step, right? What was done and how was it done. So each one of these aspects go very important, especially when you design the AI system, but keep the control where you have human checkpoints. These human checkpoints are very vital because finally the approvals have to stay true. So that's how I would say, if you look at it, this is where I call it as automation with oversight, and this plays a very important role in designing AI systems.
Essentially, when you want to scale, right, governance becomes absolutely a key factor, right? Without having an AI governance layer where you know the exact ROI that you want to achieve, right? And from an accountability point of view, right, what is it would be the outcome or the investment that you are doing, not just the ROI from a technology point of view, but from a business point of view as well, right? And when you say that human in the loop is important, right, it is again, the problem statement is given by humans, right? And so outcomes have to be measured not just by the AI system, but humans as well, right? That is when the loop will complete and you'll achieve the ROI that is required.
When we are having a conversation regarding the governance and guardrails and human in loop, that brings me to a question, Himanshu. 𝗨𝗏 positions itself as an execution-led and not experimentation-led. For an enterprise that has burned by pilots and what's making the difference between them, how do you think we should align?
See, when we started 3 years back, right, the 2.5 years back journey, it was more about how do we leverage Gen AI to generate, right? Then we realized it is not just about generation, it is also about reusing the existing models as well, right? So it become a combination of existing models plus generation. And over a period of time, what we have realized is evaluation and the metrics that we have to generate out of it, right, is more important. Compliance is more important, right? And that's why now, as part of extending Gen AI in a box, we have also created what is called as 𝗨 eval, right? So 𝗨 eval will help you from identifying the guardrails that you need, the ground truth against which you have to evaluate all your models that you have, the guardrails around cost, right? And the cost is not just about the cost of the token, it is the cost across the board, right from training and upscaling to having the right set of skills, right set of infrastructure in place, right? And right structure in the form of security testing, right? You cannot hand over the data to an LLM without tokenizing or again de-tokenizing, right? So as part of that, we have created what is called as 𝗨 eval. That's an extension of our learnings that we have had over the past 2.5 years. And you will see more about 𝗨 eval as we launch it in the next month.
That's really very well said. So final question to our senior enterprise leader sitting right in front of us regarding the AI investments that are right now going in the market, still in experimentation mode. What's the only one advice that you would give out to them, to the leaders, to the CXOs, CIOs?
So I believe AI will not reward cost. It is a system that will reward preparedness. So you need to ensure that the impact will be where you have measurable, being operational, and just not theoretical. So enterprises need to move just not POCs, stop doing POCs, get on to MVPs. They need to get on to minimum viable production systems. Start small, start with one real business problem that you're facing, get on to production, and then you open it up. If I were to summarize the entire discussion, AI is a capability that you're building. It's not just a project that you're executing. And ensure that it's all about changing the business model, the SLAs, the cost structure, and the workforce model. Look at it as an entire play and get prepared for this journey. And just don't be skeptic that how will it work. Rather, it is a matter of a leadership decision how we can make it work. And that makes a huge difference.
And you can make it work when you bring your own industry flavor to it, right? And that is where SLMs will come into picture, right? And as LLMs evolve, and as organizations start moving from POCs to a scalable implementation, they'll realize very much the need of aligning it to the industry in which they are into, right? So you will hear more of industry-specific LLMs coming to the fore.
So that's it for today. It was great having a conversation with you. It was insightful. It was wonderful to know about the agentic AI, the guardrails, the governance, and everything happening around us. Thank you so much for joining with us at Pi by 3 podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.